Captain Edward Ned Low was a notorious English pirate during the latter days of the Golden Age of Piracy, in the early 18th century. He was born around 1690 into poverty in Westminster, London, and was a thief from an early age. Low moved to Boston, Massachusetts, as a young man. His wife died in childbirth in late 1719. 2 years later, he became a pirate, operating off the coasts of New England and the Azores, and in the Caribbean. He captained a number of ships, usually maintaining a small fleet of 3 or 4. Low and his pirate crews captured at least 100 ships during his short career, burning most of them. Although he was active for only 3 years, Low remains notorious as one of the most vicious pirates of the age, with a reputation for violently torturing his victims before killing them. Sir Arthur Conan Doyle described Low as savage and desperate, and a man of amazing and grotesque brutality. The New York Times called him a torturer, whose methods would have done credit to the ingenuity of the Spanish Inquisition in its darkest days. The circumstances of Low's death, which took place around 1724, have been the subject of much speculation. Early life: according to Charles Johnson's A General History of the Pirates, Edward Low was born in Westminster, London, England, around 1690. He was described as illiterate, having a quarrelsome nature, and always ready to cheat, running wild in the streets of his native parish. As a young man, he was said to be a pickpocket and gambler, playing games of chance with the footmen of the nearby House of Commons. Most of his family appear to have been thieves. While young, his brother, Richard, was small for his age and is said to have been carried around in a basket on a friend's back. In a crowd, Richard would snatch the hats and wigs of passers-by. Richard Low later took to other forms of criminal activity and ended up hanged at Tyburn in 1707 for the burglary of a house in Stepney. Life in Boston: as he grew older, Low tired of pickpocketing and thievery and turned to burglary. Eventually, he left England, and travelled alone to the New World around 1710. He spent 3 to 4 years in various locations, before settling in Boston, Massachusetts. On August 12, 1714, he married Eliza Marble at the First Church of Boston. They had a son, who died when he was an infant, and then a daughter named Elizabeth, born in the winter of 1719. Eliza died in childbirth, leaving Low with his daughter. The loss of his wife had a profound effect on Low. In his later career of piracy, he would often express regret for the daughter he left behind, and refused to press gang-married men into joining his crews. He would also allow women to return to port safely. At first working honestly as a rigger, in early 1722 he joined a gang of 12 men on a sloop headed for Honduras, where they planned to collect a shipment of logs for resale in Boston. Low was employed as a patron, supervising the loading and carrying of the logs. One day, he returned to the ship when hungry, but was told by the captain he would have to wait to eat, and that he and his men would have to be satisfied with a ration of rum. At this, Low took up a loaded musket and fired at the captain but missed him, and shot another poor fellow through the throat. Following this failed mutiny, Low and his friends were forced to leave the boat. A day later, Low led the 12-man gang, which included Francis Farrington Spriggs, who went on to become a notorious pirate in his own right, in taking over a small sloop off the coast of Rhode Island. Killing one man during the theft, Low and his crew turned pirate, determined to go in her, make a black flag, and declare war against all the world. Piracy Lieutenant Low, using his newly captured ship, lay in wait on the popular shipping route between Boston and New York. Within a few days, he and his crew seized a sloop out of Rhode Island, and plundered it. His crew cut the rigging away to prevent the sloop returning too quickly to port to raise the alarm. He then captured a number of unarmed merchantmen near Port Rosemary. Low headed south and began operating in the waters of Grand Cayman, with a period as lieutenant to the established pirate George Lowther, who captained the Happy Delivery, a 100-ton Rhode Island sloop with 8 cannon and 10 swivel guns. When she was destroyed by Indians, Lowther and his crew transferred to a sloop named the Ranger. Lowther's crew was constantly expanded by desperate sailors willing to join him. Fast acquiring a taste for cruelty, Lowe taught Spriggs a torture technique which involved tying a victim's hands with rope between their fingers and setting it alight, burning their flesh down to the bones. Following a number of successful raids, Lowther eventually captured a large 6-gun brigantine on May 28, 1722. He gave it to Lowe to captain. With a crew of 44, Lowe amicably dissolved his partnership with Lowther. Pirate Captain in one notable raid in June 1722, Lowe and his crew attacked 13 New England fishing vessels sheltering at anchor in Port Roseway, Shelburne, Nova Scotia. Although outnumbered, Lowe hoisted his Jolly Roger flag and declared that no mercy would be given to the fishermen if any resisted. The fleet submitted and Lowe's men robbed every vessel. Lowe chose the largest, an 80-ton schooner which he renamed the Fancy and armed with 10 guns, to become his flagship. He sank the other ships of the fleet, and abandoned the Rebecca. The Boston News Letter of July 9, 1722 published a list of those captured by Lowe. A number of the fishermen were forced to join Lowe, including Philip Ashton who escaped in May 1723 on Rawata N Island in the Bay Islands of Honduras, and who wrote a detailed account of life aboard Lowe's pirate ship. Before Ashton's escape, he had been beaten, whipped, kept in chains, and threatened with death many times, as he refused to sign Lowe's articles and become a pirate. Lowe's tactics consisted primarily of hoisting false colors and approaching an unsuspecting vessel. Off the coast of St. John's, Newfoundland, Lowe mistook a fully armed man-of-war for a fishing boat, and barely escaped. He moved on to Conception Bay, capturing a number of boats around the Grand Banks southeast of Newfoundland before crossing the Atlantic to the Azores. There, he captured a French Pink, a narrow-sterned former man-of-war, which Lowe rearmed and refitted as his new flagship, naming it the Rose Pink. He also captured an English vessel with 2 Portuguese passengers aboard. Lowe had his crew hoist them up and drop them back down from the yard arm several times, until they died. He moved on to the Canaries, Cape Verde and then back across to the coast of Brazil, where he was driven back by foul weather. Lowe abandoned his plans for plundering the rich shipping trade off the coast of Brazil, and moved on to the Caribbean. George Roberts, a mate on the British ship King Seymour, recounted a meeting with Lowe aboard the Pink. Roberts' ship was captured by Lowe's fleet, of which he was now styling himself Commodore. Capsizing of the Rose Pink 40 leagues to the east of Suriname, Lowe and his fleet of 2 ships dropped anchor to remove growth such as seaweed and barnacles from the outside of the boats, in a process known as careening, necessary because no dry dock was available to pirates. Still relatively inexperienced, Lowe ordered too many men to the outside of the boat to work on the build-up, and the Rose Pink tipped over too far. The portholes had been left open, and the vessel took on water and sank, with the death of 2 men. The Pink had been carrying most of the provisions, and Lowe by now captaining a captured schooner, the Squirrel and his crew were forced to strictly ration their fresh water to half a pint per man, per day. Failing to reach their initial destination of Tobago due to light winds and strong currents, Lowe's depleted fleet made it to Grenada, a French-owned island. Hiding most of his men below decks, he was permitted to send men ashore for water. The following day, a French sloop was sent out to investigate, but was captured when Lowe's men came out from hiding. Lowe, now commanding the captured sloop, gave the schooner Squirrel to his quartermaster, Spriggs, who renamed it the Delight before sailing away in the middle of the night with a small crew following a disagreement with Lowe over the disciplining of one of Spriggs' crew. Early 1723 the new fleet captured many more sloops, including one Lowe kept, naming it the Fortune. During a trial on July 10, 1723 for a number of Lowe's crew, a sailor on board the Fortune named John Welland recalled how Lowe stripped his boat, including gold to the value of £150, then beat him and cut off his ear with a cutlass. Following this, Lowe's fleet captured a Portuguese ship called the Nostra Senhora de Victoria on January 25, 1723. The Victoria's Portuguese captain allowed a bag containing approximately 11,000 gold medals to fall into the sea rather than see it captured. One of Lowe's most noted episodes of cruelty followed. In his rage, He slashed off the Portuguese captain's lips with a cutlass, broiled them, and forced the victim to eat them while still hot. He then murdered the remaining crew. Lowe's own men described him as a maniac and a brute. A story describes Lowe burning a French cook alive, saying he was a greasy fellow who would fry well, and another tells he once killed 53 Spanish captives with his cutlass. Some historians, including David Cordingley, believe this was deliberately done to cultivate a ferocious image. Historian Edward Leslie described Lowe as a psychopath with a history filled with mutilations, disembowelings, decapitations, and slaughter. Lowe, like other pirates of the time, tried to intimidate his victims into surrendering, by threatening to kill or torture them. The crew of the targeted ship would hinder the officers from defending the ship, so afraid were they of reprisals. One failed torture session led to one of Lowe's crew members accidentally cutting him in the mouth. Botched surgery left Lowe scarred. A snow-called the Unity was added to the fleet, and used as a tender, but was abandoned during an encounter with a man-of-war named the Mermaid. As Lowe's success increased in the Caribbean, so did his notoriety. Eventually, a bounty was placed on his head, and Lowe set out for the Azores, again teaming up with Charles Harris. As they terrorized the Azores, the pressure increased from the authorities, who by then had taken special notice of Edward Lowe, despite the hordes of pirates in operation at the time. A defeat equals. Lowe, Harris and their ships left the Azores for the Carolinas. On June 10, 1723, they suffered a resounding defeat in a battle with HMS Greyhound, a heavily armed man-of-war. The Greyhound had been dispatched under the command of Peter Solgard to hunt down Lowe and his fleet. Lowe fled in the Fancy with a skeleton crew and £150,000 in gold on board and headed back to the Azores, leaving Harris and the Ranger behind. 25 of the crew of the Ranger, including the ship's doctor, were tried between July 10 and July 12, with Solgard giving evidence and recounting the battle. The men were hanged for felony, piracy and robbery, near Newport, Rhode Island, on July 19, 1723. Harris was sent back to England and hanged at Execution Dock in Wapping. When Solgard returned to New York, he was presented with the freedom of the city and a gold snuff box for his part in bringing some of Lowe's crew to justice. End of Lowe's career. Lowe, still captaining the Fancy, sailed north. He captured a whaling vessel 80 miles out at sea, and in a foul mood following the encounter with the Greyhound and the loss of his right-hand man, Harris, tortured the captain before shooting him through the head. He set the whaler's crew adrift with no provisions, intending them to starve to death. Remaining off the coast of North America, his crew took a fishing boat near Block Island. Lowe decapitated the ship's master, and sent the crew ashore. When he captured 2 more fishing boats near Rhode Island, his actions became so savage his crew refused to carry out his orders to torture the fishermen. Heading south again, Lowe captured a 22-gun French ship and a large Virginian merchant vessel, the Merry Christmas, in late June 1723. Following the defeat by the Greyhound, Lowe became peculiarly cruel to his English victims. His fleet of 3 ships rejoined forces with George Lowther in July. In late 1723, Lowe and Lowther's fleet captured the Delight off the coast of Guinea, mounting 14 guns on her, with command being given to Spriggs. 2 days later, Spriggs and Lowther both abandoned Lowe, leaving him the Merry Christmas, by now mounted with 34 guns, as his sole ship. Fate. There are conflicting reports on the circumstances of Edward Lowe's death. Charles John Sauney considered by some to be Daniel Defoe writing under a pseudonym stated in his A General History of the Pirates, at odds with other sources, that Edward Lowe and the Fancy were last sighted near the Canaries and Guinea, but at the time of his 1724 book, no further reports had surfaced. He noted one rumor that Lowe was sailing for Brazil and another that Lowe's ship sank in a storm with the loss of all hands. The National Maritime Museum in London states that he was never caught, ending his days in Brazil. The pirate's own book and Ossian both suggest that Lowe was set adrift without provisions by the crew of the Merry Christmas, in a mutiny brought about by Lowe's murdering of a sleeping subordinate following an argument. Lowe was subsequently rescued by a French ship. When the French authorities learned of his identity, he was brought to trial, and was hanged in Martinique, in 1724. Flags. Initially, Low used the same flag as Edward Teach. Later, he used his own flag, a red skeletal figure on a black background, which became notorious. He first flew his own flag in late July 1723. Low also used a green silk flag with a yellow figure of a man blowing a trumpet. This green trumpeter was hoisted on the mizzen peak to call his fleet's captains to meetings aboard the flagship. Articles. Low had a set of articles, a code of conduct and an ironic reference to the Royal Navy's own Articles of War. The articles listed below are attributed to Low by the Boston News Letter. The first 8 of these articles are essentially identical to those attributed to Lowther by Charles Johnson. It is likely that both reports are correct and that Low and Lowther shared the same articles, with Low's 2 extra articles being an ordonnance, or amendment, adopted after the 2 crews separated. I. The captain is to have 2 full shares. The quartermaster is to have 1 share and 1/2. The doctor, mate, gunner and boatswain, 1 share and 1/4. 2. He that shall be found guilty of taking up any unlawful weapon on board the privateer or any other prize by us taken, so as to strike or abuse one another in any regard, shall suffer what punishment the captain and the majority of the company shall see fit. 3. He that shall be found guilty of cowardice in the time of engagements, shall suffer what punishment the captain and the majority of the company shall think fit. 4. If any gold, jewels, silver, and sea be found on board of any prize or prizes to the value of a piece of 8, and the finder do not deliver it to the quartermaster in the space of 24 hours, he shall suffer what punishment the captain and the majority of the company shall think fit. b. He that is found guilty of gaming, or defrauding one another to the value of a royal of plate, shall suffer what punishment the captain and the majority of the company shall think fit. 6. He that shall have the misfortune to lose a limb in time of engagement, shall have the sum of 600 pieces of 8, and remain aboard as long as he shall think fit. 7. Good quarters to be given when craved. 8. He that sees a sail first, shall have the best pistol or small arm aboard of her. 9. He that shall be guilty of drunkenness in time of engagement shall suffer what punishment the captain and majority of the company shall think fit. X. No snapping of guns in the hood. Legacy. Edward Low's acts, along with those of other pirates of the period such as Edward Teach, Bartholomew Roberts, and William Fly, led to a great increase in the military presence to protect shipping lanes, resulting in the effective end of the Golden Age of Piracy. By 1700, the European states had enough troops and ships at their disposal, following the end of a number of wars, to begin better protecting their important colonies in the West Indies and in the Americas, without relying on the aid of privateers. Pirates based in the Caribbean were chased from the seas by a new British Royal Navy squadron based at Port Royal, Jamaica, and a smaller group of Spanish privateers, sailing from the Spanish Main, known as the Guarda de Costa, or simply the Guarda. Less is recorded of Low than of other equally prolific pirates such as Teach and Stede Bonnet. Howard Pyle, in an 1880 children's book on pirates, said, "No one stood higher in the trade than Low, and no one mounted to more lofty altitudes of bloodthirsty and unscrupulous wickedness. 'Tis strange that so little has been written and sung of this man of might, for he was as worthy of story and of song as was Blackbeard." Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, in his work The Green Flag, described Low as savage and desperate, and a man of amazing and grotesque brutality. The New York Times said Low and his crew became the terror of the Atlantic, and his depredations were committed on every part of the ocean, from the coast of Brazil to the Grand Banks of Newfoundland. Low has featured on stamps and commemorative currency around the Caribbean. A postage stamp featuring Low was commissioned by the Cayman Islands in 1975, and in 1994 the government of Antigua and Barbuda featured Edward Low and his brigantine, Rebecca, on a legal tender $100 bill made of gold leaf. Ned Low is one of the pirates featured on the Pirates of the Caribbean ride at the Disneyland theme park in California. A duplicate of Lowe's flag was used for the flag of the fictional pirate Southang in Disney's Pirates of the Caribbean films. Ned Lowe is played by Tadhg Murphy in the Sturts TV series Black Sails. Some of Lowe's haunts, such as the waters around the Isles of Shoals off New Hampshire and Alote in Nova Scotia, attract treasure hunters who seek artifacts in the ships he sank. See also, List of pirates, piracy in the Caribbean, privateering on the Spanish Main. References. Further reading, Fleming, Gregory. At the Point of a Cutlass, The Pirate Capture, Bold Escape, and Lonely Exile of Philip Ashton, 4-Edge ISBN 978-1,611,685,152, Cordingly, David. Under the Black Flag, The Romance and the Reality of Life Among the Pirates. Harvest Books ISBN 0-15-600549-2, Seeds, Don Carlos. Gospel, Howard F. Wood, Stephen. Under the Black Flag, Exploits of the Most Notorious Pirates. Dover Publications ISBN 0-486-42131-7, Roberts, Nancy. Blackbeard and Other Pirates of the Atlantic Coast. John F. Blair ISBN 0-89587-098-3, Crooker, William S. Roberts, Bartholomew. Kidd, William. Easton, Peter. Pirates of the North Atlantic. Nimbus Publishing, Halifax ISBN 1-55109-513-0, Scoggins, Rebecca. Methods of Torture Among the Caribbean Pirates. Agnes Scott College, Rediker, Marcus. Villains of All Nations, Atlantic Pirates in the Golden Age. Beacon Publishing ISBN 1-84467-008-2, Wedby, Charles Harry. Pirates, Ghosts, and Coastal Law, The Best of Judge Wedby. John F. Blair ISBN 0-89587-295-1. External links. America's Worst Pirates from GregFleming.com, Guide to Edward Lowe.